I'm Jay Wolpert. I'm the screenwriter of Century of November.
Excellent. And then you can look at me for the whole rest. Perfect.
Terrific.
So the first natural question would be why? Why did you want to be a part of this project?
You think that's a natural question, that why should I want to be a part of this project? Therein lies the story. Actually, the real truth is, it was a classy piece of material. I get to do a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is good. When I say that, I mean I got to adapt the Count of Monte Cristo, and that was terrific. Pirates of the Caribbean was fun. I've even done an adaptation of The Sword and the Stone, which was one of my favorite books. And so it's not like I ordinarily get, but now. But what I never get is I don't get stuff that has that sheen to it the way English Patient had a sheen to it. It just doesn't come my way. Action comes my way, fantasy comes my way, fun comes my way, that sort. Daring do. But real drama of this kind against the canvas that this is played against, which is World War I, the way Gone with the Wind was played against the Civil War, that was special, and especially since the book itself is written beautifully. And that really was the first thing that took me, was that the book came, I looked at it, and I thought, wow, this is really terrific. And then my second thought was, what in the world are these people sending this to me?
Why do you think they did?
Well, who knows? New Year's Eve, it seemed like a good idea. What happened was, I got a call from my agent, and he said, there's this book, and some guys from Canada, and I don't know, and I mean, if you want it, I'll send it to you. And I said, well, send it to me. And I took it, and I read it. Oh, and it came with a letter. Well, let's tell the truth. It came with a letter, that's right. And the letter was extraordinarily flattering. It came from Patrick Stark, who's one of the producers on the project. And Patrick waxed extraordinarily about the adaptation of Count of Monte Cristo that I had done. Well, a good way to get my attention is by flattering me, anytime, yes, and so I confess. I said, at least I should do is read this guy's book, and I did, and I was just blown away. And I told my agent, I said, I got to tell you, this is something I don't usually get. It's something really of a different league entirely. Again, we're not making value judgments. We're just about different kinds of things. It's just that this had a different feel to it entirely. And so he said, well, I mean, do you really want to do that? I said, no, but I'll call him up. And the reason was because it was not a studio movie, which meant, you know what it means. There's a whole chain of events that occurs when it's not a studio movie. First of all, it means you have to get the financing. Second of all, it means the financing isn't going to be enormous. Will the bloody thing get made at all? All that stuff, which means that I would be off the market for studio movies that I tend to get sent. So my agent and my lawyer already hated these poor people. And so I called up Patrick and I said, Patrick, first of all, I want to tell you just extraordinarily flattered, how extraordinarily flattered I am. I really am. And I read the book, and I tell you, I understand why you're so excited about it. I could understand that. It's not going to happen with me, but I wanted to thank you. And well, why is it going to happen with you? Well, because my agent and my lawyer already hate you. And he said, but why? He said, well, then I went through it. He said, well, I'm very encouraged. I said, Patrick, did you hear what I said? How could you be encouraged by that? He said, I'm encouraged. And this went on over months and months of me saying no, but I don't want this to sound like I was, just being coy or whatever it was. It wasn't that. It kept on haunting me. And there was a part of me that kept on being more and more sorry that I wasn't involved. And he calls me up one time and he says, okay, what is it that you hate about doing a studio movie? And I said, what do you mean? He says, because we can't pay you what you'd ordinarily get. You're right. But whatever we can do that is not in that form, that you don't like about studios, we're going to endeavor to make that happen. Well, you had to love them. You just had to love them. And as this was going on, this courtship, I began to feel like, unless I did this movie, I was a villain in a Lassie movie. I mean, I wanted to be on their side. You know, I didn't want to be the guy, I didn't want to be Edward Arnold, you know, who said, get out of here, and where's your mortgage? And I wanted to be, these guys were the heroes of this story. And so I said, finally, if we can make this happen, I'm going to do everything I can to make it happen. And Nick, who is Patrick's partner, both of them did everything they could, and I did everything I could from my side, and we went around and did all kinds of things because we were in love with the same piece of material. And so far, I have to tell you, it's been a pleasure.
No, Patrick could have been as earnest as Leave It to Beaver, and if it hadn't been a good book, you still wouldn't be here. We're just waiting. You okay? Sorry. It's okay. No worries.
Doesn't mean you're not a nice. Doesn't mean you're not a nice person.
I'm sure you're lovely. Now, I could take my coat off, so that was good.
Right.
Now, if it wasn't good source material, and you used some really interesting comparisons. You said The English Patient, one of my favorite movies ever. You said Gone with the Wind. You said classy.
Yeah.
What is it about this novel, for those of us who haven't read it, that someone is using those comparisons?
Wow. Well, it's about important stuff. It's about war. It's about who gets left when that happens. It's about a theme that I love, which is that, you know, some are born great, some are whatever great, but some have greatness thrust upon them. It's about those quiet people who find a strength in them somehow that they didn't know they had, and bloom. You know, those people, you know, it's so lucky, all those people who have the charisma in them. It's so easy for them. But I'm always drawn to the guy who doesn't, you know, and who manages nevertheless. It's about that. It's got an enormous amount of heart. It's not sentimental. It's just its sense of limits, which is always a big part of classy material to me. It's the refusal to go over the top, but to move you anyway. All those things. It's a very special piece of material.
Set the story up for us. What is Century of
Well,
about?
What the story is about is it takes place in an extraordinary time in history. We know about one part of that time, but we don't know enough about the other, which is where it seemed like both man and nature was conspiring to destroy us all. It's 1918, and it's World War I, which is an extraordinarily cataclysmic war. World War II gets all the press. The Civil War gets all the press. But World War I was just an absolute butcher shop. I mean, just appalling. At the same time, the Spanish flu is just decimating Europe and coming over to North America. And it's just, wherever you go, it's blight. And it looks like, honest to God, the judgment of God. It was that kind of time. And against this, a very simple man, a passive man, really, a man who is acted upon and is used to it, gets the news that his son in the last days of the war is dead. And he feels the need because he has nothing left, his wife has died years ago, he feels the need to find where this happened, to just walk the places he walked. And so he decides to to go over there in the last days of the war and right after the war, to go over there and find that, but it turns out to be, in effect, an odyssey, because there's all kinds of things happening. One of the things, for example, and a very big part of the script and a big part of the book, is he is caught in London. And I say caught, you wouldn't think. When we think of celebrations like the end of World War II, we see that Life magazine article and the sailor bending over the girl and kissing her on the cover and all that stuff. Well, let me tell you, being caught in London on November 11th, 1918 was no fun. I mean, all hell was breaking loose there. It was anarchy. And there are various things that occur on the ride crossing Canada to Halifax, on the ship from Halifax to England, on the boat from across the Channel to France, and then what happens in France itself is worthy of Homer. It is that kind of a thing, and the reason he is doing all this is because, and the reason why he wants to be there is he wants to bury hope. He wants to just wring out of him any feeling that a knock on the door would ever mean his son was coming back. And he is convinced he has nothing to live for, and in this process finds out that he might be wrong. It's really special stuff.
Would it be possible also to give us a much shorter answer? That was a wonderful long synopsis, just one that they might be able to use in a shorter piece, maybe just talking about a man searching for some closure, finding the place where his son died in the war.
No, I don't think so. Okay.
You're smiling really nicely. My Irish charm.
Yes, and it is indeed. I would simply say that this is an odyssey about a man who believes that he has nothing to live for by virtue of the fact that everything he loves is taken from him, and finds during this odyssey that he may be wrong.
There have been many wonderful books that have been made into absolutely terrible films. What is the greatest challenges? What are the challenges that you are facing in adapting this novel, or any novel for that matter, but specifically this novel, to the screen?
Well, that's a big question. Let's talk about any novel. Any novel, the first thing I do when I approach it, and I do a lot of adapting, and it's nothing new that I'm saying, I've said it before, that you have to, as Lady Macbeth says, screw your courage to the sticking point. You must purge yourself of reverence for the source material, because as much as you love it, you are not filming a book, you are making a movie. And they are two very, very different things. I have to tell you that in all my whole life, and I am a huge movie lover, the only movie I have ever seen that was absolutely faithful to its source material was To Kill a Mockingbird. Nothing else. Everything else has changed. In any event, so you have to first of all understand that. Second of all, you have to deal with the specifics of the challenges of the specific book. Count of Monte Cristo had its problems because it was dense, long, and it had no physical action, which audiences would not stand for. You know, if somebody's wearing a sword, they damn well better use it, you know. Never mind stock fraud, you know. If you're going to have revenge, you better pull that sword. So there are things you have to do. Now, this particular one had its own challenges, one of which is that he's traveling alone. And there are some extraordinarily things. Well, let me change that. He's traveling alone for the first act and a half. And there are some beautiful things in the book about what he's thinking, etc. But all of that has to be externalized for us, because it's not, you know, we don't have the omniscient author to tell us all about this stuff. So that's a big challenge. That probably, I would say, is possibly the biggest challenge. Another challenge is that you've got what is basically, as I said, a man who is acted upon. Well, that's not always fun to watch. So you've got to therefore have things occur that are going to intrigue the viewer and compel the viewer, because your protagonist is himself not being proactive. Part of his journey is he becomes proactive as he begins to realize that there's something to live for. That's part of the fun of this book and part of the fun of this movie, I think.
How do you overcome those challenges? I mean, how do you envision, or have you written a script, and how does it differ from the book?
Well, I really, broadly speaking, the way I've described it, putting obstacles in various and interesting characters, taking characters that are in the book and perhaps giving them more idiosyncrasies or more dimension to them that will play cinematically, that sort of thing. The other ways I've changed it, you really need to know the story more to really tell you about that, and I don't want to do that because then none of us will make any money and my agent will be right.
And your lawyer won't like you
I knew
either.
it, that's
God,
right.
God forbid.
That's correct.
You're talking about adapting the Count of Monte Cristo and some of the challenges that you encountered with that. How is this a similar challenge, and how is it different? I mean, are they kind of similar projects? Or
they're really not similar projects. No, their problems are different, and I think that's an overlapping question for the last one, because I think I gave you too much. What mostly you deal with the Count is what I was talking about. Well, no.
This one harder.
What's that?
Do you find this to be more of a difficult challenge?
Do I find this more?
Yeah.
Do I find this a more difficult challenge than the Count of Monte Cristo? I find it of equal intensity. They're different, totally different, but equally challenging. The only difference that what made the Count maybe a tad harder was because it has iconic stature at this point. And, you know, millions of people have read it, millions of people have you know, if you go on the IMDb, they are still arguing about this adaptation. And I laugh my butt off, because I think it's so funny that they're still knocking each other. I mean, they have these Talmudic discussions about, well, it's not like the book. Well, it's not supposed to be like the book, it's a movie. And they go back and forth, and I kind of want to just throw each of them a sword and just, so that's, I mean, that's, that's the problem. The problem is, will you disappoint a base readership that book has over the years? And the answer is, as I say, I don't care. I'm making a movie.
Well, I heard a screenwriter once say that, you know, when they make the film adaptation, it's not like they take every single book in print and burn them.
Right.
You can still go back and
That's right.
if you wish.
That's exactly
Yeah.
correct. That's exactly correct. There was, that's what Kurt Vonnegut said. They asked him whether he was bothered by that. And he said, I still have my book. It's still my book.
Now, it's a period piece, and you talk to any screenwriter, filmmaker, production coordinator, by golly, probably the first AD, and they'll say a period piece is a big challenge.
Yeah.
It produces a whole bunch of logistical obstacles that one must overcome. As the screenwriter, what kind of obstacles face you with a period piece? And then, as you say, a period of time that, although not that long ago, one that we somehow forget, the early 1900s, don't we? I mean, we think of other times more.
Here's what I think. I think the answer to every question about movies is character. Whatever the question is, I don't care what the question is. The question is, if the question is, this has no logic to it, this movie doesn't work at all, I will say the character, i.e., lady walks up to Rick in Casablanca, says to Humphrey Bogart, oh, monsieur, can I trust the prefect of police, blah, 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 blah. And basically the question is, if I sleep with him, will he give us the letters of transit? can I trust him to do that? Because we have no money. My husband's trying to win money in the back of the whatever. And Rick goes over there and he says, well, everybody has trouble in Casablanca. Yours may work out, excuse me. Walks into the back of his own his own casino. Walks into the back where they're doing the thing. There's the poor guy. He's down to one little thing. Rick, the owner of the casino, says, play 26. Now, he doesn't whisper, play 26. He says, play 26. Everybody else goes, they're all doing all the other numbers. How could they be doing the other numbers? Rick is saying, play 26. They do. And guess what? This guy wins. And Rick says at the top of his voice, keep it there. And he does. And everybody else goes, and they all do a different number. It makes no sense. And by the way, anytime you can explain to me what the hell the letters of transit are to begin with, I'll give you an award. Nobody understands that. Doesn't matter. It works because you care desperately about the people. Now, what are the problems in a period piece? I mean, how do you lick them? You lick them with character. You care enough about the character, and that's all that. They'll take the trip with you. They'll go with you. I can't help you with the budget. I can't say to you, no, yeah, we're going to need, it's World War I. We're going to need those little tin hats, and we're going to need some guns and a little poison gas, and somebody's going to have to dig a trench every now and then. That's all going to be true. But I will tell you that if you care about the people, you won't have to know that in Sarajevo, where the Archduke got shot, and that's how all this began. It's all about people.
Well, let's talk about those people. Charles Martin.
Yes, Charles Martin. Charles Martin is all that I said. Charles Martin begins as what you think is an unstamped coin. And he is actually a man of great integrity. But again, he does not carry with him the aura of charisma. And he gradually becomes something probably that he himself never dreamed he could be. And anytime you take somebody you care about, especially somebody who's vulnerable, and now you put him through transformation, everybody comes along, if you do your job right.
Need a very special actor to play this role.
You do indeed. An actor who can be vulnerable, and an actor who can play every man, even if they can play every man, but their aura is not every man, then you got a problem. I'll give you an example. Tom Hanks, terrific. Absolutely right for this part. No question about it. If you could age Philip Seymour Hoffman a little bit, and I believe you can do anything to Philip Seymour Hoffman, he could do this in a heartbeat. If you give it to Harrison Ford, you're in trouble. Because what Charles Martin becomes is a little like Harrison Ford as we think of him. And so consequently, there's no journey for Harrison Ford, no matter how good an actor he is, and I believe him to be a very good one. Other casting, you can go another way to casting. There are several actors that are the every people casting. They're like, it's like having a wild card, What is it you want him to play? Zoom, there he is. The Russell Crowes of the world, whatever you say. But they've got to be able to communicate, I'm just like you. I'm just like you.
Those are big names. You feel confident, and I guess we got you, so we can maybe get them. You got them in your BlackBerry there?
Why Captain Butler? I've never had anybody say that to me before. I think that good actors are attracted to good material. The book is a wonderful book. If I'm worth my salt, I hope I will deliver a wonderful script, and from there, hopefully our chance to screw this up will be over. If they don't do it, that will be their chance to screw it up. But hopefully we won't.
So they'll probably hate their lawyer and their agent and accountant as well until they win an award for this role, perhaps?
From your mouth to God's ears.
Hollywood likes to categorize things. They want to label everything. So what is the genre? Is it a drama, an adventure, a war movie, a period piece?
I ain't heard a bad thing yet. It's all those things. It's all those things. I would ask you, what is Gone with the Wind? It's a drama. It's an adventure. It's a period piece. It's a war movie. It's just what it is. They're primarily a drama in which adventuresome things happen to a person against the canvas of a war, of a real cataclysmic war.
You talked about Casablanca, where there's a scene, and just watch your mic there, that you don't. You know, where we don't even really know what the heck they're talking about, but it really doesn't matter in the bigger picture of the story because we like the characters and it's kind of irrelevant.
Right.
So in this one, set in 1918, a war which, as you said, not many people know much about, is there still some contemporary themes?
Oh, of course there are.
To
Oh my God. Oh my God. War is the most contemporary theme, no matter where the war is set. Why? Because wars are always the same. They always start with a miscalculation. Wars always start with miscalculation. We can beat them. And whether it's George III or any other George you'd like to think about, it's always a miscalculation. It always is paid for by the young men. And in our last century, by civilians. But never, interestingly enough, by the guys who start the war. You know, in the old days, at least Henry V was at Agincourt. You know, when you were the king and you were responsible for sending all those people, you were out there in front. Nowadays, they get to sit in the bunker, you know, down below in some mountain somewhere and point fingers about and press buttons. And the grief is always the same. And the stupidity is always the same. Sure, there are wars that you must fight. But you know what? It's very clear when you must fight them. Generally, the wars you must fight are very, very clear. But there's so much room for arrogance and stupidity, and you see it played on and on and on in each epoch of history. So to say, is it contemporary? You tell me the difference. Yeah, I'll tell you the difference. They're using short swords here, and they're using Gatling guns here, and they're using atomic bombs there, but it's the same war. It's the same war.
Because of the contemporary theme that has continued, and as you say, pretty much every war movie, how do you envision the audience? I mean, some people might be worried, some Hollywood people, but it's set in a different time, and you know, will our 18 to 34 males who seem to be the ones that we want in our audience find it interesting? But then they want to bring their girlfriends.
You know, that's an interesting question, just the way you phrase that, because my guess is the girlfriends will want to see it before the other guys will. But I don't worry about the girlfriends, interestingly enough. They somehow get these things. Here's what I think. I think our business is to shoot it out there and do the best possible job we can do. Like I say, that's our responsibility, to turn out a good product that we can all be proud of. The minute you start worrying about, will this be right for that, that's the tail wagging the dog. That's how you get Ewoks.
And he has nothing more to say there. This is a bit of a second career for you, writing. You've got a very interesting background. When you do, it's like, my God, the guy has done everything. Is writing your first love?
You know, I didn't know it until I did it. I mean, when I think about it, I've always written, but certainly not professionally. But, you know, I would write skits. I think probably if I went back, I would say that in college, I started to write the skits for my fraternity. By the way, at the same time that Paul Simon at my college was writing the skits for his fraternity. And every year, he'd win. How could that be? How could that be? Yes, he did. He would win. I would come in second. He would come in first. But I started there and found out I really, really loved it. And then when I was doing Price is Right, I was the first producer on The Price is Right. And it occurred to me about, I guess it must have been about maybe the third year, fourth year. I'm looking at these showcases, and you know, it's a mink coat, it's a washing machine, it's a car, it's a globe bar, and I'm thinking, why are we doing it this way? There must be a thematic way we could tie in these showcases. What about his movies? So I started to write movie showcases. We did Star Wars, where the props were the prizes. So R2 was played by a trash compactor, and the rocket ships were trailers, and and they had and we didn't have any lightsabers, so Janice Pennington and Anitra Ford, who were then the models at that time, were fighting with lava lamps. I mean, had all this sort of stuff, and I began to have these wonderful times. And I remember one day, Mark Goodson, who owned the company, came onto the stage and saw some damn thing I was doing. I forget whether it was Demetrius and the Radiators or something, where we were doing, cars, giving away 2 cars, and I don't know. But anyway, and he looked there and he looked at all this stuff. Oh, it might have been Corn with the Wind. That's right. It might have been Corn with the Wind, because Anitra was playing Garlic O'Hara, a heroine who loved to eat. And I know it's terrible. And he looked at it and he said, "You're using this as a creative outlet, aren't you?" And I said, "Bingo." Anyway, so I guess I always wanted to do it, but didn't really, and I did very well as a game show producer, and I loved game show producing, so there was no reason not to do it. And then one day what had happened was, when I started Price is Right, I hired a young girl, because it was going to be a complex show. Don't forget that in those days, we're talking about the early 70s, most shows were one format, meaning like Jeopardy's a one format show. You do the same thing throughout the show. Whoever gets the most money at the end of the show wins, but we all do the same thing, answer question. Well, Price is Right was going to be a multi-formatted show, meaning you're going to have different games, which meant that each game was going to have to be supported by different art direction, by different prizes, by different all kinds of stuff, costuming, and it was going to be a complex show, and I had to hire somebody who was going to be under me, but the person who was really going to handle the nuts and bolts paper flow of all this. And I had 2 or 3 people to choose from, and I hired the most inexperienced one, because she was bright and smart and had lightning in her eyes. Hired her right out of college. Anyway, she stayed with me for about 1.5 years, and then went on to do other things. And about 20 years later, I'd seen her about 3 or 4 times after that. About 20 years later, I'm sitting at Arts Delicatessen in Hollywood, eating lunch, and I hear this voice. She's standing over me. It's this girl. She says, "Jay, why haven't you written?" And I look, and her name was Nancy Myers, and she did Private Benjamin. She wrote Private Benjamin, produced Private Benjamin. Baby Boom, she wrote and produced. What Women Want, she directed, produced, wrote, which is, I think, the highest grossing film that a female director's ever done. Parent Trap, Something's Gotta Give, etc. Anyway, she said, I'm doing pretty well. Why haven't you written? And I said, because I'm doing fine. And she said, "You should be writing whatever you have, I want to see." And so I won't bore you with the details, but I had an idea, and she took me to Disney, and we got a script deal, and I wrote it, and from there everything flew. And every year I take her to dinner, and whenever I have an interview, and the question is in any way related, I make sure to say that. I really owe my career to her.
Well, she may owe her career to you. You're the one that hired her
Well,
originally.
that's the reason why she did it.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah, well, it's all true.
Do you like writing screenplays?
I love it. I love it. I love it. You know why I love it the most? I love it the most because every time I immerse myself in a different world. I've swung from yardarms. I've flown B-24s. I've suffered in the Chateau d'If and plotted revenge on all my enemies. I've done so many different things, and right now I'm in the Ypres salient in Belgium, running around in no man's land. You can immerse yourself and in the research and in all of that, and you're in a different world every time. And I turned down a lot of work because I don't want to be in that world for 6 months, whatever the world is. You know, I'll sit there and I'll say, you know what, I don't have fun there. And so I don't. So it's wonderful. And I get to go anywhere I want with my computer. And I wrote Pirates of the Caribbean, my part of it anyway, in a tall ship off the Andaman Sea, in the Andaman Sea. Yeah, I really did. It was great fun, and so it's good.
How has this experience thus far been for you, and especially working with first-time producers?
You know, the Air Force, I remember at one point, maybe when they were first beginning, because you know, there wasn't always an Air Force, there was an Army Air Corps, and then I think it was maybe around 1947 it became a separate service. Somewhere along the line, they generated a motto, and the motto was, unhindered by tradition. And it is a joy, because these guys are unhindered by tradition. When they don't know the rules, and because they don't know the rules, wonderful things happen. They just are not bound by all the nonsense. By the way, the stuff you were talking about, when you say, well, Hollywood does and Hollywood says, and they don't know from Hollywood does or Hollywood says, they want to just make a movie. And so far, every step in which they were required to step up to the bat, they've done it.
You answered at the beginning about the conversations, or the original letter from Patrick, and then when you went on and said no, and he went, oh, that's encouraging.
I'll never forget.
Do you remember any of the other conversations? I mean, can you recall once perhaps you started to come on board a little bit in response to first writing? I mean,
well, listen, all it was great. I met him after all of this, when we began to really flirt seriously. I don't think we had a deal yet. But I think when I was still trying to figure out, wait, you know, maybe I should do this, but let me meet this guy, make sure he's not completely out of his mind, and also, are we on the same page on how we want to handle this? And I met him up here. I was going to a resort on Vancouver Island, and so I came a day earlier so I could meet with Patrick, and we had a drink, and sat down, and I went through a whole checklist, and I said, if I said to you, what must you have in this adaptation, what would you say? If I said to you, for God's sakes, you know, if you were saying, for God's sakes, Jay, whatever you do, don't keep this, what would it be? And I remember my first question was, let me ask you a question, why did you love the Count of Monte Cristo so much? Because I wanted to hear what that was all about, to see if maybe he was not loving the right things. But it was all 100%. And you know what? There are certain people, and it's true of both these guys, that exude decency. You just have a feeling these are decent people. And you know what? And if they, let me put it another way. If it turns out, there are certain people that if it turns out they're not, it was worth trying, because you just get that feeling, that's all. If I can't take that gamble, what gamble can you take?
So the age-old chicken and the egg question, which persuaded you then? The earnestness of these two gentlemen, or the source material?
I think that I think they were equally balanced. I think the absence of one or the other, and I wouldn't have done it. I would never have done that book without these guys. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I would never have done that book without people I was impressed with to the degree I am impressed with these guys. And by the same token, I wouldn't have just done anything that they had to offer.
You signed the writer's agreement in Phoenix.
Yes.
I understand. Tell me about that. Was that unusual in any way?
Unusual in any way? Well, I'm telling you, unhindered by tradition. I have no idea what these guys are doing. I have no idea. The bottom line is it all turns out all right. But why they do the things they do, I have no idea. I mean, Nick wants to sign this in Arizona. Nobody does anything in Arizona but sweat. Why are we going to Arizona? Well, because Nick wants to do it in Arizona. Come on, he's building a house. Okay, fine, I'll go to Arizona. And I go to Arizona, everybody's very nice, we have a lovely conversation, they feed me, always good. And And they sign, they have somebody taking pictures, and I mean, I'm thinking, this is what happens at the end of this is what happens at the premiere. Why are we doing this now? You don't even know if I can put 3 words together yet on this project. I didn't understand it, but you know what? Sometimes you don't have to understand everything, you know? You just have to go with the flow. It works. It seems to be working. What can I tell you?
Because it's all been so unusual, and you clearly really like the guys.
I do.
Do you kind of almost feel a little bit more pressure to deliver something absolutely fantastic?
Yeah, I do. Because it isn't just the affection. It's the fact that you realize these guys are doing this out of their own funds, and they moved so far in my direction in the other issues that I just so appreciated that yes, I wanna return that in kind, or if not in kind, in a way that will make them happy and feel that it was justified. Absolutely. You know, we spent about oh God, maybe 5 hours today in my hotel room talking about the project. And you know, it was just could not have been more convivial. And I think about it in terms of the usual stuff in Hollywood. And you know, I've had very good experiences, and I've had not such good experiences. But you know, I just think it stands up pretty well.
You're also a producer in the project, and you know, although you've said it's all about character and story, you can't have the guy just talking in a corner. There has to be some production value.
Right.
So how big in terms do you foresee the production to be? I mean, do you imagine shooting on locations to the story, Canada, the UK, France, Belgium?
I'm gonna let the story dictate what happens. It seems to me, and I did this with game shows, and I do this with scripts, you do this stuff from the inside out. You start with the character and the story, you build around that character, and where that goes, it goes. At the end of the day, we have a script, we love it, we're proud of it. How much is it going to cost? Once again, I say, my turn to be a fool is over. My turn to screw this up is over. I promised a good script. Now we're producers. Okay, now we have to go and we have to find money. Well, the first thing we've got about finding money, the jewel in the crown, begins with a good script. I'll let the other people make, you know, whoever comes in on this decide how much and what the budget is and where we are, etc. But I'm certainly not going to shorten or in any way stunt where we need to go because, oh God, where are we going to get the money from? You got to you have to let the flower bloom. And it'll stop where it stops, where the story stops. That's how much it'll cost. And we'll see where that is. You know, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It all depends. But I'm sure not going to make that decision in the creative area to begin with. I think that's one of the problems with Hollywood is so much is driven that way, it goes backwards.
Although you talked earlier about talking about what had to be in it, what didn't have to be in it, and that type of thing, where would you say you had to shoot? I mean, absolutely, positively, the film just wouldn't be the same if you didn't have that shot of whatever, that location.
Let me think.
A lot of it you have to recreate.
Let me think about that. I would tell you this. I think you certainly don't have to be in Belgium because you are not, it's not like you're shooting this in Brussels, you know, or you're not, you know, or you were shooting something that took place in Prague. Good luck. Now you got to build Prague. But, you know, building craters and all of that stuff, I can get some barbed wire. I know where I can get a good price on barbed wire. But it's not that, but there are other places. For example, I'm not saying it would have to be done in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island, where the movie basically begins. But having been there is this is not a word, but a paradisical aspect. There's certainly a pristine aspect to Vancouver Island. And I think that would have to be replicated. You would have to find something as good as Vancouver Island because that counterpoint with the hell that is in the third act and is shown earlier on as well, that counterpoint is very, very important and very, very effective, it would seem to me. So that I would say, if you can't find me Eden, I'll take Vancouver Island, you know.
And finally, what is your goal with the film? I mean, you said in a way when you deliver the script, you can say, there's my part, but you write anything. When you begin anything, you can't help but look. It's like giving birth to a child. You envision them in the future. You know, you always do that. This is your child. What is your goal with the project?
That's a very good question. And I'm going to tell you what my goal is. I was very fortunate in life for reasons I cannot really take credit for. It just happened this way. I learned a very important lesson in my life, which is in regard to this business, whether it be television, whether it be game shows, narrative television, movies, failure is the rule. If you are calling failure, it wasn't a hit, it never got bought, it didn't, you'll walk around depressed your whole life if that's what your criteria is for feeling good about yourself. What I do is I've defined success as, does it make me proud? Did I do the best job I could do, and am I watching that thing and saying to myself, good for you, you did good. I walk away happy if I have fulfilled that for myself. I'm very lucky that way. So what my goal is to be proud. To be proud I was associated with a project of that quality. Count of Monte Cristo gets an enormous, I mean, it gives me great satisfaction. I get a lot of kudos from it. People are always, whatever. I can't tell you how proud it makes me. That is money. This did okay. It made some money. It did good. It got critical thing. But I look at it and I say, it's not bad, Jay. Not bad. And to feel that way about another project like this one, that's always my goal. My goal is always, your turn to be a fool is over. You got away with it. You did a great job by your own lights. You can't worry about what the other guy, whether the other guys are going to buy it or not, whether they're going to come, whether they're going to do it. Can't worry about it. Do the best job you can.
Although you must hope they come.
No, well, of course, no. Oh, no, never. Are you kidding? No. I'll blow up the theater before I let them in.
Why should they come?
What?
Last was postscript question. Why should the world see this film?
Well, it's almost like going backwards from the questions. Because it's contemporary, because we're in the middle of this now, but because at the end of the day, if you don't care about war, meaning if that isn't what's bothering you, if it's none of the things that surround it, it is about character. It is about someone who's just like you, who is, no, there's something different than that. Martin is not just an everyman, because an everyman in the Hitchcockian sense is James Stewart in Rear Window. He's the guy, the ordinary man who finds himself in extraordinary circumstances. Martin does something different. He is an ordinary man who puts himself in extraordinary circumstances when he never thought he had it in him, and other people didn't either. That's the difference. Now, all of us think that there are things that are beyond us, that put in a situation, we would never rise to the occasion. And this is the story about someone who did. And I don't know that that's easy to resist.